And welcome back to Meeting of the Minds. Today I'm here with the great Dale Ahlquist, the legendary scholar of GK Chesterton, the president of the Chesterton Society. Dale, thank you very much for joining us.
Gene, a great pleasure to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I had my big reversion to the faith about 5 years ago, and yours was one of the first DVDs that I received to learn more about the faith, and GK Chesterton, learned a lot about him.
Oh, there's nothing better to escort you either into the church or back into the church than Chesterton. He's a great companion to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I was just saying before, we have a group of West Chestertons in the Sleepy Hollow area in upper Manhattan, I guess past Manhattan, that young adults crazy about G.K. Chesterton, your work. I just actually had the actor who played him on G.H. Walker, John H. Walker.
John Walker, sure.
Yeah, he was on the show, and we're happy to have you here. So everyone was real excited that I'm going to be speaking to Dale Ahlquist. So here we go. I'll jump right into it. We're living in a crazy period of time, basically a Marxist revolution that we're seeing now. How would G.K. Chesterton respond right now? What would he want us to do as good Catholics?
Well, first of all, Chesterton predicted something like this was going to happen. So I think that's one of the first things to point out. He said that we're about to enter into a new Dark Ages, and the previous time the Dark Ages came around, it was because of the fall of Roman civilization, and it was called the Dark Ages because everything in civilization had been attacked, if not destroyed, and so. That's what we're watching happen right now. All of our major institutions are crumbling. Social order is crumbling. There's a rise of barbaric activity. It's civilization that builds statues. It's barbarianism that tears them down, right? And so he saw all this come. He said it was the fall of a civilization. Of a civilization is usually connected to sexual anarchy, because that's the sort of thing that creates disorder in a society. A society has to be based on families and on solid families. And if you have strong families, you have a strong society. And Chesterton says if the family starts falling apart, the society will start falling apart. So yes, he saw all this happening again. He saw we were headed for the same thing, but he also said that in the last Dark Ages, there was one light in the Dark Ages. There was one light that was holding civilization together, and that was the Catholic Church. It was the monastic system that preserved learning and preserved culture and preserved art and preserved order, and actually started then to rebuild civilization, because as the cities fell apart, people came and started building new cities around the monasteries. They started gathering around the monasteries, and they were the source of education and the source of rebuilding. That's what created medieval Europe then. And Chesterton warned, he said that the problem with the new Dark Ages that we're going into is that we don't have the monasteries anymore to preserve civilization, to preserve learning. He said that work is going to have to be taken over by the family. The family is going to have to become little monasteries, preserving culture, preserving learning, preserving order, while the rest of the society falls apart and then is rebuilt. So we are in the process already of rebuilding a society that's falling apart right now.
Right. And I feel like a lot of Catholics are pretty fed up. They've had it up to here with the decline within the church, within the country. And I feel like Chesterton had a lot of frustration too with how things were going, but it seemed like he didn't get sucked into despair. He was still always hopeful and humorous and was able to bridge gaps between people. How did he do that? What can we learn from him? So much we could learn from him, obviously. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Gene. He always kept the attitude of hope and joy in the midst of really darkness and chaos around him. Chesterton says hope means hoping when things are hopeless, or it's no virtue at all. I mean, that's the virtue of hope gets put to the test when things look hopeless, and that's when we have to exercise it. His joy comes from the gift of life itself. Life is a gift that we don't deserve. We didn't deserve to be born. We didn't deserve to have the gift of existence. It is this great privilege we have been given. There's only one way to respond to such great a gift, is to be thankful. And that's why Chesterton says thanks is the highest form of thought. And so thanks really is what drove all of Chesterton's thinking. It drove his action and his creativity. It's built on a foundation of thanks. And the people who encountered him during his lifetime and who encounter him now still are drawn to his great joy and his great goodness. And that's sort of infectious. And that's the sort of thing we need to spread. One other good point, Gene, is that we are living in an age right now where people don't know how to have an argument. They don't know how to debate. And they just descend right away into shouting and name calling and catchwords. And Chesterton had the great ability to get along with his opponents. And he did it by loving them. And his charity showed to them. And he never attacked them personally. He just went after the bad argument. But he did it charitably. He just showed this way of thinking is going to, not be sustained. And so he would always find something to agree with and something to sympathize with his opponent's point of view, and then take him, on a journey towards the truth. And I think that was his winning way, and we have to duplicate that.
Oh, big time. And I think a lot about his relationship with Bernard Shaw, who they disagreed on almost everything, correct?
Everything.
Yet they remained best of friends. And coming from an Italian family, we argued completely wrong. It's that stupid, and you're stupid for saying it. We didn't separate the person from the issue. How did Chesterton do that?
Yeah, that's exactly what he did, though. He took the argument, he took the actual argument, attacked the argument with showing his charity and affection towards the person. Because remember, the point of the argument is, he says, is to differ in order to agree, whereas the failure of argument is to agree to differ. And so the way you want the argument to end is not with your opponent being crushed and defeated. It's supposed to end with your opponent agreeing with you and coming over to your side. And if you start with the position that you're stupid, you're not going to probably get him to come to your side.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the catchphrases of Chesterton, I've been using those with my wife, and she really gets a kick out of it when I say them. And I'm like, I can't take that as my own. That's Chesterton again. It seems like every day we're doing something like that, but that's great. Yeah, we really need those lessons that he's given us. And I remember listening to one of your lectures on Sensus Fidelium on the downside, the pros and the cons of both conservatism and liberalism. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, Chesterton was able to cast his blows both ways, because he said the whole world has been split into conservatives and liberals. And he says it's the business of the liberals to go on making the same mistakes, and it's the business of the conservatives to prevent the mistakes from being corrected.
That's great.
And he says, and the problem is he really did believe in democracy and common sense and tradition, that you respect the truths of the past. You honor your father, but you also honor your grandfather and your great grandfather. He says true democracy means giving a vote to your ancestors. And so in that's, he's liberal in the sense that he believes in freedom and that rights need to be respected with the understanding that they are divine rights. But he's a conservative in the sense that he believes in tradition and honoring the good ideas that have come before us and trying to conserve those good ideas. He says the problem with most conservatives is that they're only conserving the most recent idea before the present idea. They don't usually go back far enough in what they're conserving. Yeah,
makes sense. And I think you were saying about the four things that Chesterton said that were destroying society: Hudge and Pudge, right?
Yeah.
Toxic feminism and public education.
Yes. Big government, big business, radical feminism and public education. 1910, Gene. He said that in 1910.
That man is a legend. That's
Yeah.
why he is who he is. How do you think he would? How do you think he would have viewed the whole Vatican II thing and the changing of the mass with everything you said there with like the conservatives and the liberals? What do you think he would have thought of all this?
Well, Chesterton loved the Catholic Church, and I mean, he's just all of the, his journey to become a Catholic was a very difficult and very deliberate one, and it was a long process for him to become Catholic. But those who knew him said, he would always be faithful to the church. And I think the problem, within the church today with the divisions we see is that people, once again, they forget charity. They forget that we love the church. That's why we support, anything the church does that is for our love for the church. And if the church does something that's not serving the church, that, we're obviously going to, speak up about that. But everything we have to do has to be out of love for the church and love for our enemy. And I think that's what Chesterton's great strength was. He also, he saw a creeping liberalism within Christianity, which is one of the reasons he became Catholic. And to see that, actually going into the church, I'm sure would have saddened him. But he also said, the history of the church is that it gets knocked flat throughout history. And he says it's the institution that keeps dying and rising from the dead. And it's just throughout history, there's been times when it's been absolutely dead, the church, and yet it comes back to life. And he says that's because it has a God who knew his way out of the grave.
Our faith goes as its maker did, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So I always wondered that if he would he be using his wit and wisdom to fight against maybe some of the errors that crept into the council, and I think about the mass being changed. Would he use the same wit and everything to go at that with maintaining the full love and obedience to the church, but at the same time, hey, what are we doing and what are we not doing?
Well, yeah, that's a great debate. You can't say exactly which side he's going to fall on in that debate because it's that part of it's unique to our time. But I think in the sense of being faithful to the church, his love for the church, that has to be foremost in everyone who's arguing about these issues.
Absolutely. Do you think he'll be canonized a saint one day? I mean, I'm wondering why he isn't a saint. What's blocking that?
Well, I've been pushing for that for a while, and I absolutely believe he will be canonized. There is a very large and devoted popular cultist devoted to him right now, and that just is growing all the time. We actually have a prayer card that we spread. There it is. There's the Chesterton prayer card, and with a prayer for his intercession on there. You can get that at our website at chesterton.org.
Yes, we're going to link all of that. I'll ask at the end, and I want you to tell me everything. We're going to link them all at the bottom of the show notes.
Great. Yeah. So we have that prayer has been translated into 20 languages, and there's people who are devoted to Chesterton all over the world, and the good works that are coming out of not only our own efforts, but out of people who are devoted to Chesterton. I think there's all the evidence there for a true holy cultist, and I think Chesterton will be canonized. He's one of the reasons why we need to canonize him, Gene, is because we need more lay saints. We need more models of lay spirituality.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I actually, now that we're talking about this, I thought about a priest friend that I have in Staten Island who's trying to found a personal prelature. I mean, that's his long-term goal, kind of like how Opus Dei is, but it's called St. Joseph's Workshop. It's a school of spirituality and formation that he's begun, and GK Chesterton is the patron.
No.
I didn't realize you could make him the patron if he's not yet a saint, but apparently you can.
Well, what people forget is how saints are made. It's not that the church sits around and said, "Well, who should we canonize this week? Let's look up at the history of people who haven't been canonized yet and pick out a good one." It always starts with a cultist, with a group of people who are devoted to that person, who have been brought closer to God and live their lives as Christians better because of their devotion to him, and who see the heroic virtue and who see evidence of him interceding, and answering prayers. And they go to the church and they say, would you open the cause? And they have to start. It starts with a bishop. We ask a bishop to open the cause, and he does. And then it goes, the postulator comes in, does the heavy lifting, and then the Congregation for Saints evaluates it, and they say, yeah, this is a saint. Let's canonize him.
That's it. They have the power to do it.
Right. And I can tell you this. There are bishops, there are people in the Vatican who feel that this cause will go forward. So
that's great. Please God. So this is what I have for my Chesterton collection. I got this big book that has some of his. I'm sure you've seen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've only read Orthodoxy and Everlasting Man, and I have this book which was edited by some guy with the same name as you. So that's great. The Universe According to Chesterton, definitions of words or different things that he said about different topics. So what's the order? If someone's first learning about GK Chesterton, what order do you recommend they start with? if there is one.
Yeah. No. Well, I used to always have a hard time answering that question. I never was sappy with the Chesterton book that I recommended as the first book. So then I wrote a book. I wrote a book to be the perfect introduction to Chesterton, and I think The Apostle of Common Sense that I wrote is a very good starting point for people who haven't read any Chesterton at all. And then I wrote a second book called Common Sense 101, which if for some reason you can't find the first one, read that one instead, Common Sense 101. And then after that, I like to start with essays, the Father Brown stories. At some point, you have to read Orthodoxy because it's so essential, but it's also essential that you read it again after you finish reading it. It's one you can keep going back to, but you'll always get more out of it, And then Everlasting Man, of course, is the other pillar that you have to read.
It's almost like when you read Chesterton, it's like a new toy that it just has all these different features that even when 3 months later you're like, wow, it does that too. It also
yeah, it's true. He has a way of. Someone said he rewrites the books after you've read them. He's rewritten it, so it seems like it's a new book the second time.
That's right. I guess the scary part with me approaching Chesterton is, well, first of all, I heard every Catholic says Orthodoxy and Everlasting Man are a must. So I read them. But when I listened to Bishop Barron, he said, when you read Chesterton, it's almost like enjoying a fine wine or champagne that you read maybe a paragraph, put it down, and then think about it, and then come back. And then I thought about John Walker, who recommended a similar thing. Read a page, leave, and come back. And me being a former wrestler, I like to plow through things. I'm probably more of a Belloc personality. So it gets discouraging because he wrote so much, and this isn't even a small fraction of it.
Yeah.
How am I going to get through it all?
Well, I've been reading Chesterton for about 39 years, and I've read probably more than just about anyone, in the world has read. There's probably a few more people who've read as much as I have, and I feel like I still haven't read it all. So I hope that encourages you. But that's why we publish Gilbert Magazine. We always have some short selections of Chesterton's short essays. That's another great way to approach him, is in his short bits of writing.
Okay. And now because my business is all based on sports psychology and mindset. So what mindset or what kind of mood or state do you want to get yourself in when you're approaching GK Chesterton?
Oh, that's a great question. Chesterton recommends that when you read a book, anytime you read a book, you come in with perhaps a receptive skepticism. So you're open to what this book has to teach you, but you're willing to do battle with it as well. But the thing is with Chesterton, you have to be open when you're reading it, and not just be purely a skeptic, purely looking for problems, because you'll get yourself tied into a knot usually in about the third sentence if you do that. And so I think that it's just a matter of, what is this book going to teach me? And you go in with this attitude, I'm here as the student and I want the book to read me.
Excellent. Excellent. Are there any misunderstandings that people have with Chesterton, or something that you notice people, they just don't get it quite right, or they thought Chesterton meant this, but he actually meant something else?
Well, I think that uh, one of the things they get wrong about him is that they always are thinking that he agrees with them, and it might it might be that they have to do a little more work and agree with him. And so, I mean, he does get co-opted for a lot of different things because they have an incomplete understanding of him. So that's one weakness. Chesterton's been criticized for many things, a lot of which have to do with political correctness, and people have to get past that. Again, if you're going to learn anything, you have to be open to see past those immediate prejudices that we sometimes suffer from. But what's amazing is that even though he is a product of his own time 100 years ago, how universal and timeless he is.
He really is. He really is. Question from one of the West Chestertons. He asked about Cecil Chesterton, the brother. He said he's a real enigma, and he said if you talk to Dale, please ask him about Cecil Chesterton. So was he a Catholic before?
Yeah. So Chesterton had a younger brother who was about 5 years younger than him, and Chesterton famously said when he was born, when his younger brother was born, his words were as a 5-year-old, "Well, now I shall have an audience," and
that's how I felt with my little brother.
Yeah, but it turned out just to be the opposite. His brother was a fighter and an arguer, and the two of them started a debate as soon as Cecil could talk. The English pronounce it Cecil. As soon as Cecil could talk, they argued basically until Cecil died. He says, but they never let a quarrel interrupt a good argument. And it's really important. So again, they would stick to whatever point was they're arguing about it, but it never became is so, is not, is so, is not. And so they would argue all night long sometimes. But more than anyone else, it was Cecil who honed GK's debating skills, because he knew he had to be able to answer an argument from every angle. And they agreed closely on many things, but they disagreed on many others. And it was ironically Cecil who first became Catholic. And then shortly after that, he tragically died in World War I. And Cecil had started a newspaper called The New Witness. He'd actually worked with Belloc on a paper called The Eyewitness, and then became The New Witness. And Cecil was the editor of that. And when he went off to World War I, GK agreed to be the interim editor of the newspaper, and that was unfortunately a permanent decision. He had to permanently take over as the editor because Cecil died. And Cecil was a bit of a loose cannon. He sometimes in public had strong sentiments of what he believed, but didn't have his idea as well formed when he expressed it. And I think he got himself into some hot water more than once because of that. Whereas, GK was always very measured in what he said, and always calm and charitable, and never the bull in the china closet that Cecil was. Cecil, in that sense, was more like Belloc, but didn't have the same brains as Belloc. But Chesterton absolutely loved and was devoted to his younger brother, and always defended him, and that sometimes proved costly to him. Yeah.
Wow, great. I mean, I think about it as a wrestler, and I have two younger brothers, fairly close in age. You usually see great wrestlers, they have a brother, a partner that they could spar with. Oh. And now you see that with, of course, the intellectuals.
That makes sense. That's a really good analogy. Terrific. Yeah.
Excellent. Other question I wanted to ask about, what was Chesterton's take on usury? What were the church teachings? What's with that?
Yeah, well, the church teachings on usury are probably one of the least mentioned things today in the world. The church still condemns usury as a sin. Almost no one knows that anymore. But they were following a good line in the Greek philosophers. Plato and Aristotle also condemned usury as the sin. Money is supposed to be not the not a tool for making more money. Money is supposed to get us the goods that we deserve for our labor, right? It's just supposed to be a medium of exchange. He says this. Plato says it's not supposed to be the mother of interest. But read the Psalms. Blessed is he who does not charge interest on a loan, who takes no interest on a loan. The idea of a productive loan is that if I give you money to start a business, I have invested in the business, and if your business succeeds, yeah, you pay me a benefit for having invested in your business. But if you need money to do something else that's not a productive thing, I should not be charging you interest on something that's not productive. It's called an unproductive loan, and that's basically just So if I give you a productive loan and you lose the investment, I lose my money, right? An unproductive loan is you pay me back or I break your kneecaps, right? Or I take your house. I'll take your house if you don't pay me back. And that is the mother of all the debt that is crushing the world right now. It absolutely mathematically is impossible to ever pay back the unproductive loan. It is a Ponzi scheme that will collapse, and we're looking at that collapse imminently.
Oh boy, yeah, it's crazy, and everything now. It's the whole COVID, and then the riots and everything. I mean, Chester would be shaking his head right now with all this.
Yeah, he wouldn't be one to say, "See, I told you so." But I mean, the thing about a prophet is this: a prophet is telling you, this is what's going to happen if you stay on the road that you're on. And the prophet is saying you need to repent. You need to get off that road and change. It's not that what I'm telling you is inevitable. It's what I'm telling you is up to you if you want to change it or not. And we're just simply on the road that he said we were on, and we have to still repent and get off it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And a big thing that stuck out in my head that you brought up about Hudge and Pudge, big government supports big business, and how they're together, they're working together, and that jarred me when I thought about that. And I said, it's almost like I wish I could draw a political cartoon. Christ the King on one side, and then the other side, it's not so much conservatives against liberals. It's almost like this monster with the Freemasonic body that has two heads.
Yeah, it's a two-headed monster or a four-footed beast. Think about what happened at the beginning of the crisis when they announced it. You had the government officials making the announcement there's going to be the shutdown. And who else was that? The heads of the major corporations saying, we are here to help. And so the big major corporations were also participating in shutting down all the small businesses. And we'll take care of you in the meantime. And that was Hudge and Gudge working right there.
Hudge and Gudge. I keep saying Pudge.
Yeah, Pudge is another guy. Pudge is one of your wrestling friends.
That's right. That's right. He's got to lose some weight. He's got to get down to his weight class. That's great stuff, Dale. So what do you have coming up? What are your plans upcoming for the Chesterton Society?
Yeah, the Chesterton Society remains active in spite of the shutdown. We do have a online conference this year instead of our gathering, but we'll be online the last day of July and the first day of August. It's a 2-day event in the evenings with some talks. Go to chesterton.org to register for that. Some excellent talks about the theme of the conference is the Chesterton Cure. The Chesterton Cure. Yeah.
Excellent.
And then we published Gilbert Magazine. I mentioned it earlier, always a good source of Chesterton. People are intimidated about which book to read. Just get the magazine, and there's always short and spicy nuggets of Chesterton, along with some other columnists talking about how GK really is so timely today, and how his lessons are applicable. It's a wonderful group of people who are part of the Chesterton Society. And then our big project, of course, is the Chesterton Schools Network. It all came out of the first Chesterton Academy that was founded here in Minneapolis 12 years ago with just 10 students. And now 12 years later, there are 30 schools around the United States and in Canada. and they continue to grow. And this is really the grassroots solution to all the problems in our society right now. I mean, as I've gone on record recently saying, the main problem, the main enemy in our society today is the public school system. We're watching the results of that all around us. People don't know how to think, and they don't know how to behave. So it's yeah. And so this is the grassroots solution, taking control of our children's education.
I agree. And I remember when I was looking up the locations, I saw there was one at Immaculata High School. I did a retreat day there, spoke to the school there last year, and I said, man, that's great. That's about 20 minutes from where I grew up. Now I'm in Upper Manhattan, right by the George Washington Bridge. So I think, well, I have a son who's 16 months old. I got another one coming, another son in 4 weeks. So where do they go? How do we get one in the New York City area or the North Jersey area? What do we do?
I'm really glad you asked that question. How do we get one? You start one. That's how they all get started. It's a group. This is Chesterton's ideas of Catholic social teaching, how it applies. It starts at the local level. Everything starts from a grassroots effort. There's no top-down thing. We don't plant the schools. We have the curriculum. We have the model. We have all the templates. We give you the school in the package, but you start it, and then you're part of a network which just gives you strength because we share information, we support each other, but they all are local independent schools, and they work in cooperation with their local bishop. And if for some reason the bishop doesn't want them to be a Catholic school, then they just operate as an independent school and teach the Catholic faith. We are having great success, though, in the support of local bishops all around the country.
That's great. So I think about, okay, so it's an add-on to the curriculum they already have. Is that correct?
No, it's a completely new school. Yeah, but now with some of the things like Immaculata, or there's sometimes there's a large existing Catholic school, and they have a Chesterton Academy track within the school. So they're taking our curriculum, but it's being run by that Catholic high school, and so they may share a couple classes with the regular curriculum, but otherwise it's our unique curriculum that's being taught. And one of the things that we require is daily mass. To be part of a Chesterton Academy, you have to have daily mass.
That makes a lot of sense. The source and summit. I don't know how could you have a full education if you're not starting with the mass? That's great. Oh man, we'll have to talk outside of this too. If there's anyone around this area to link up with, people that I'm sure you have connections all around, be happy to do something. But like I said, Dale, I love what you're doing. Where can people find more information on the Chesterton Society? So
Chesterton.org is our main website, but for the schools, go to ChestertonSchoolsNetwork.org. ChestertonSchoolsNetwork.org. Otherwise, there's a link to that from our webpage at Chesterton.org as well.
Excellent. We'll throw it all up on the show notes, and if there's anything you see I missed, we'll add it to it. We can always go back. Dale, thanks a million. I appreciate it. God bless you. God bless your family.
It was a real pleasure to be with you today. I hope we can talk again sometime. God bless.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you.